things. You hear that? See that? And one more thing. I'm just going to tell Jacob, who's monitoring that tablet. Jacob, push, got it. Ms. Harrison, you're good to go. Have a good meeting.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you all. I apologize for this. We planned ahead to have a hybrid meeting so that we would have people here to discuss, and we would also have the availability of this, and then we got locked out of the town hall, so I apologize. And thank you, Lorraine, for saving us and opening the doors. So I want to call the meeting to order 7:16, so apologize again for the 16-minute delay. Our first agenda item is just the meeting minutes. Did everyone get a chance to look at the meeting minutes?
Yes.
Yes. Does there anyone have comments or additions?
There was just one section that she jumped. I think she missed the line.
There was a typo, so can I, and I know we got them late today, can we make a motion that I will fix that typo? Of like 3 extra words, and we will approve?
Motion to approve as amended.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and aye, everyone in favor, okay. And so approved. Our first, now we're moving on to update and discussion on next steps for aquaculture program. So we had a bunch of follow-up items on this. So I guess I will update everybody on what happened so far. We had a couple of follow-up items to invite. We got a couple of correspondence, and we invited those people to attend the meeting to talk about the aquaculture program. So we have that to discuss. We also, I will update everybody that we had decided to send a letter, an email to all the applicants, the original 9 applicants, to see if they were interested and to give them 2 weeks to respond. And we received responses from 5 of the 9 applicants. So we have that to discuss. And what's that? Oh, another one came in. Okay. And then we have to discuss steps moving forward. We also talked to DMF about how we would move forward. So I had a discussion with Chrissy this morning about the process for moving forward. So is there those are the things we have to talk about? Is there any suggestions as to what we should talk about first?
Let's just hear, I think of the 9 emails that got sent out, all positive, 6, 5 plus 1 today, we're all still interested, yes.
Yep.
That's good.
Okay.
And when's the 2 weeks up?
2 weeks already up.
So that
Yeah.
the 6th one
So
slipped
it's
in?
6 slipped in at the end, yeah.
With my email, so.
Oh, went to your email, okay.
It's good, copy you as well. That's good.
Okay, sorry, miscommunication.
So we down to 6?
We're at 6 then.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Um,
Done.
that's done.
Can you tell us about your discussion with the
I can tell you about the discussion with the amount that I had today, which I thought was a really positive discussion. So regarding the program, they have a new, so I think so let me level set. We originally thought they would have to come out and do a site visit prior to doing all of it, prior to marking the sites and everything. That is in fact not what has to happen. They will come out to certify the site after the select board would approve. So first what would happen, and they're going to send me an aquaculture propagation form. The new aquaculture propagation form. So there is a new form that they're requesting towns use, and I think this is really new, as to not all towns have used them yet. So we will have to get the form, have the applicants fill out the form, or make sure that we have all the information on the form. We will then have to then we would have to roll into holding a public forum about sites. So we would have the marked sites, the four corners of the whatever number of sites we have marked, and have a public advertised, proof of advertisement with the, the public meetings where you advertise 10 days in advance. You host the meeting with the select board. You then have minutes of that meeting. You have decision at that meeting about how many then move forward. So say we're talking 6, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever number that comes out of that. There would be we would approve X number. It would then go to DMF with all of that information, and they would then do a site survey to certify the site. And what they're doing is, like, as we talked before, biology, right? They're doing a biological evaluation, including eelgrass and other shellfish of the site. And I expressed how much work we've done on the eelgrass front with CSCR and all the mapping, and they were impressed with the amount of work that we've done. And they also mentioned to stay, she also mentioned 25 feet away from the eelgrass, which we
Our
have.
regs are 50 current.
Yeah, our regs currently say 50, so we're even more conservative than the state is. So I think we're in a really good place with where the map is and where the area is and the process. And they're very supportive of this, so.
Discuss the NEPA review process potentially.
Oh, and then, so after that, then it would have to go through a MEPA, a MEPA evaluation, a site application, and at that point, Chrissy told me they prefer a single application from, or a combined application, signed off by the town, and then it would have to go Army Corps, and that is an individual application. So I said that we would work, the committee would work with, and the town would work with how they prefer to get the applications through, and that we would follow the process and keep her posted on the process and what's going on.
Can I ask what you think?
It's the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. So it's making sure that people are not impacting the environment, things like that. So it's kind of a check and balance with the state. Same thing, you do dredging projects, things like that. So what the slope kind of comes in is, I'm sure Susan was getting to it, that could be up to potentially $7,500 to have that MEPA review process, because it involves filing, it's a state public hearing, no different than what this would be. And people can add comments, same as this meeting, so that has yet to be worked out with the selectmen, so.
So we would have to figure that out. Yep. But not insurmountable.
Right, I don't
Yeah,
personally think it's a showstopper by any stretch, it's a little different than most other towns are doing in the Commonwealth, so.
Yep.
And would this permitting happen after we made the decision to choose, let's say we choose 6 people, 2 acres each, or whatever we decide,
yeah,
after that happens, that's when it goes to.
yes. After, and let me also back up to we're an advisory board, so we're advising to the select board, and the select board makes the final decision. And so then after they make that decision, then DMF makes their, stamps, certifies, and then then it moves to MEPA, and then,
And then the Army Corps.
correct.
That could just be comments, it could just be another permit, all depends, I'm not sure how the handles that, but. And you should probably also clear conservation as well, it may be de minimis activity, it may be a notice of intent, so those are
Yeah.
questions that have to be answered as well.
But, I think overall, they were very supportive, and it seems like there's a fairly clear process as far as state processes go.
Clear but arduous.
Yes, right, I said fairly clear, but yes. Other questions on Are there
Any
One
questions?
more quick question, so of the area that we were talking about.
Yep.
Which was clearly outside the controversial zone of title issues. And 50 feet away from the eelgrass. Did anybody calculate how many total acres there are in that area that could be possible?
New area?
The restricted area that we're talking about, outside the mean low tide line, and then 50 feet away from the eelgrass, I call it a channel, effectively. What is that
See if I can
total
do
acreage?
Oh,
I see it.
look, hey, I told you I got trained on this, right? So this is what we're talking about, right? Like, see my cursor
So along that, almost between those two.
right here, like in here, between this, all along here.
Right.
Between the line,
I mean, is it 100 acres?
It's quite narrow.
it's
It's 2
narrow,
acres
it's
wide.
like
300 something.
2 acres wide,
What is it?
yeah. So
Maybe
so
50.
between, we measured from here, like here to here is 2 acres. But then we didn't measure the whole area, correct?
It's in the neighborhood of 30 to 70 acres.
Yeah, yeah.
The right-hand side is the beach.
Oh, sorry, let me orient you all. This is and I'm zooming out to see like this is the channel going into Little Cohasset Harbor. The breakwater here, the beach, all along. And then there's the river back here, goes in back toward
Would be helpful to point out what
beach.
the original area was compared to the
Oh, the original area was here, right?
Right.
So this side of the
Right.
mean low
Right.
line. Like there, I mean, I don't know exactly. I mean, it was around here and around up here.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good.
And then this is the rock here.
Susan, do you have the picture of the original proposed plot plan available or?
Let me look. You know, I
Easy to
might
toggle between those
because
two.
I posted everything online,
Yeah, we
right?
were looking at that last meeting, so.
Yeah,
Well, it's fine with me, I just didn't.
I only asked the question just to get a sense of scope here.
yeah.
Undisputed areas, what's the
Right.
total area that we're
Right.
thinking about? And again, it's just a pilot program, but if it's undisputed and we go through those 4 approval processes,
Right.
it seems like if it ever grew, that area is already approved.
Right.
Not approved for shellfishing, but approved in these other levels of what's the right word?
So are we talking about the original 2019 sites that we had?
There was a photo that had the
Where?
the
Like
squares
this
on it.
one, are you talking about
Yeah,
this one?
that's the
There,
one.
I even put this up there though,
So,
like,
Don't
oh
do it.
my god, like.
Don't do it. I mean, that would give context of where we started and where we're at.
Yeah, the first, there I put it up there, then I would have like.
You know where we're going?
Where we've been.
Change, we know that we had an engineering survey, and that's gonna show you why we're moving closer to the eelgrass and farther out of the water, and
Yeah. Yeah, so,
if you don't wanna do it, don't.
I don't know, what do you guys think? I can,
I think you pointed out.
oh yeah,
Well,
enough with over here, okay.
Okay.
Let me do the share, I'm not sharing anymore. Okay, so it's on our website though, so like, it's on our website under the documents. Actually, I don't think it's that bad, I will, here, I'll do it, I hate to like
It's not the scale.
not help
It's
people.
not to scale, but it's for informational purposes
You're right,
only.
it's not to scale, and it's on our website, and this was the first site that we did, this was the first site plan that we had, and again, to point that out, that's the breakwater, that's the channel, there's the rock here.
Right, you got-
The mean low is like around here, right? So like, it's different maps, right? So what I pointed out was we had some here, like over from the rock, and then we had some up there. But that's 2019, that's like past, gone and not happening. This
How big were each of those
is
squares?
close to
And
that.
that was supposed to.
But then again, you've got different maps, different like you know, like this one's more zoomed in.
Each of those yellow squares, how big are each of those? 2 acres?
1 acre.
1 acre.
Those are 1 acre, so,
Yeah,
so we don't have 50 acres in here.
No.
no,
Maybe 20.
yeah, it's like 20 acres.
Originally, it was 27, I think, starting off.
Yeah. Oh, the original plan,
The
yeah.
original first.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's stay with this, but I guess for informational purposes, it was over here and it was over here. And it was a totally different map, because it was like really zoomed in, so it looked a lot bigger. But all of these maps are on our website and available for I guess anytime's a good time for a public service announcement. We reorganized the website and we put 2019 aquaculture documents and 2022 aquaculture documents. So if you're looking for this map, it would be on the 2022, and all the other stuff with the applications we put on the 2019, so that there's different folders. Okay, so any other questions from the committee, or should we go to public comments?
Yeah, I think so.
On this specifically?
Can we see if anybody's raising their hand?
We can, and we can, advise, I have on the agenda how to raise hands. It is if you called in with a phone, it's *9 to raise your hand. If you're a participant, you can go under the bar. If you're on your computer, you can go to the reactions and click on that and click raise hand. So over to the right, next to the leave button, you can do that. So I don't see any on Zoom at all.
Right, and right now you do not have any hands raised via Zoom.
Okay. Are there any questions in the room? Yes. And to start, could you state your name and either affiliation, address?
Mary Hawkins, 38-46 Treasure Island Road, and I'm on the same guys email.
And it was a lovely letter.
Thank you so
email.
much.
Thank you very much. I do want to thank you for your time and thought that you put into that.
I put so much thought into all of this, and so many sleepless nights, and so much angst. I cannot even tell you how passionate we feel about this, but I am really trying hard to keep it in mind. So I do have a question, and I think we have a number of farmers in here, so between all of these, somebody can probably answer this, and that is, as a committee, it seemed like most of the applicants put they were gonna launch from Minot. And I would like to know, what is your recommendation gonna be to the select board as to where in Minot farmers are going to be able to launch from and where they're going to be able to park?
Yeah, I don't know that we can mandate where people would park or launch. And I guess I recall some of the applications were that did not say that.
So I guess so I mean, I don't know, maybe not everybody knows Minot, but you've got beach, you've got kayak launch.
Yep.
You have people's personal property. So does the town, can you launch motorboats from the kayak launch?
No, you cannot. So, I mean, I can answer that. You can, there's some weekends you can't launch a kayak from the kayak spot because people block that spot. It drives me nuts, but.
That's what I was curious, and then from the beach, can you launch from the beach?
Can you launch from, you mean from Minot Beach or,
No.
I mean, I wouldn't think so. There's a couple boats that are have moorings there, so.
Never heard of this before, either location is on.
I've never heard of either location that's.
I haven't seen anything, it's been something that people in Minot have been quite high anxiety about. So am I missing then the only other option would be is if you make an arrangement with a property owner?
There are a couple options, and if I recall the applications, it's been a minute since I've read them, but I think some had relationships with people that had boats in Cohasset Harbor. some had boats in Scituate Harbor. Some talked about launching in Scituate. And there might have been some that talk about any sort of launch of anything in, off of that Minot kayak, would be a kayak or very small.
Be very limited.
Very limited, very light, and very small, like I've seen.
And the
I've seen a
proposals
little
didn't
aluminum
commit
stuff out
to
there.
what they were
Yeah.
doing. This was, and I don't even know how you might know where they were.
I didn't, and
Right.
that
Yeah.
for 2 years has been, I
On
mean,
your mind,
it's
right.
like, where are they gonna launch from, where are they gonna launch from? I
Right.
said, Minot, where are they gonna launch from? I
Right.
mean, the anxiety level, I know a couple of weeks ago, Mike said, oh, the farmers have been through a lot. Well, I can tell you, a lot of people are like, where are they gonna launch from? What is, I mean, there's a lot of anxiety about what's going on, mostly out of not knowing. So, I think I just heard a lot of people just sigh with relief, actually.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think you're gonna see a dealer truck buying oysters there. I don't
Oh,
see that happening.
yeah.
I think a lot of guys would come from the harbor and drive around, some might have an easement to people's property or agreements. You know, that's up for the farmer to figure out. We don't tell people how to go lobster and catch fish and things like that. That's part of their business model and their business plan. But I don't think that money spot's highly viable all the time. It's very tight to get in and out of there.
So a follow-up question then, if it's gonna be arrangements with other property owners, will the town know addresses or where that is to make sure there's room for trailers or whatever, for whatever neighborhood they might be launching from?
You have to follow all the town bylaws and parking regulations, no matter where they park, no different than going to the beach. You can't congest traffic or things like that, it'd be come up to these traffic issues. I mean, we're talking 6 farmers, I don't think you're gonna see a lot of activity out there, they're gonna be out there every single day. You know, it all depends, I think a lot of them are gonna come around from Scituate. That's all, but that's not for me to decide.
And can we take a question from the Zoom? I wanna be mindful of we'll get your question next, you just have to wait. I wanna be mindful to make sure that we're taking one from the room, one from Zoom, if they exist. Marissa, sorry, the type I can barely see. Marissa, did you have a question? Oh,
She's muted.
She's,
I've got, Ms. Harrison, I have it. I've asked her to unmute.
Okay.
Ms.
Oh,
Miller,
great.
you should be able to
Allowing
speak.
me to, it wasn't allowing me to unmute before. So my name is Marisa Millard, also from Treasure Island Road. And I guess I don't think that alleviates any concern that I feel like, if it were restaurants, there's, you have to come up with where the parking is. And it doesn't seem realistic to me that people are going to be launching from Scituate Harbor and going there. It just seems that by you saying, they have to come up with the solution. Well, why don't they have to put it in writing? Why isn't that in the application? I thought there was a space for them to put in the application how they were going to actually manage this. That just makes sense to me. And I went to the Cohasset meeting, pre-pandemic, and a question I had asked then, which I still don't know the answer to, is if it's a pilot program, what are the parameters that will determine if it's successful or not? Because the impression I have is that it will be considered successful if the oyster farmers are happy and want to expand, and that there isn't any, concern would be too strong a word, because I'm sure that you are concerned about the people that live in Scituate, but any parameters for what if it does cause a lot of disruption or issues or affects people's quiet enjoyment of being able to use the recreational areas ourselves as Scituate residents. That there doesn't seem to be anything in the arrangement of we might not continue with this if it's having a really adverse impact on other people. And I still haven't seen any discussion or any addressing of that. It's just, the applications don't seem fully complete to me. Saying that they're gonna like launch from mine it is not very complete to me, because you've just said they really can't launch from mine it except from someone's private property. And I don't know, that just seems, it seems very sort of loosey-goosey from the point of view of a resident who's concerned.
Yeah. Thank you for your comment. I think you had like two points on that. I want to first tackle the evaluation. I agree with you, and I think we've talked about how will we evaluate this. It is a pilot, like how do you evaluate for success? And as the select board talked about this previously, it was not just related to like how many oysters can you grow, or it would be community impact as well as, you know, education and whatnot. And CSCR was interested in helping figuring out evaluation questions and interviews and whatnot, because there's a biological component based on if things grow, right? And there's also an impact component. If, you know, if there's an assumption going in that it would drastically impact recreation, for example, we would then tackle, well, did we create a program that didn't impact or moderately impacted it, you know, like, so I do think that we were kind of stalled and didn't get to the evaluation questions because we didn't get to implementing a program, but it's definitely something that we're thinking about in a broader perspective than just how much the oysters grow. The second was regarding parking. You have a good point. I mean, we can ask and delve into where launch would be. I don't recall. I'd have to go back through applications to see which ones said mine it, if they did. I do recall people mentioning having a boat in the harbor. It's not even that they would launch from Scituate Harbor, but have, like, whether it's a mooring or a slip. So they may all not have, you know, trailer parking issues. So it's something we've heard a lot of comments and we could probably think about as far as advice on guidelines, maybe. I don't know, does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's not really within our charge
No.
for the Shellfish Advisory Committee, so I would say that to express your concerns more fully about launch areas and quiet enjoyment of these areas, you would address comments to the harbor master and the select board. That would be what I would say. I mean, you can look at the Shellfish Advisory Committee charge to see what exactly we were given to look at in terms of the regulations that we were to propose and to make the recommendations to the select board. It's the select board that is making the decisions, and they did not ask us to look at parking. You know, we have the town bylaws for you know, not obstructing public ways and not being unsightly, and you know, it's not something that we were specifically tasked with. We're more looking at the water quality, the commercial regulations, and the potential impact to tax base in Scituate.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other? Yes.
Hi, so Sean Sweeney, 9 Conehaska Road in Scituate. For those of you who don't know, it's the Indian Trail neighborhood, so I back right up to Bassing Beach. So I think I appreciate the comment that you made, and I was really concerned about this too, and having, you know, being in the area. And I think that you actually have to consider on the application when people put down how they're going to launch. I think you have to seriously consider what they write, because if they do say mine it, and I did look at the old applications, and I think 4 of them said mine it, and I know the area really well too. You can't launch a boat there, and if they're putting this on a document asking for consideration for a license, you might want to take pause and think about that, and wonder what are they missing, right? And I will add to this, and this is my original question, but I have a 19-foot center console flat bottom boat, and anything more than 1.5 feet you can't get from Scituate Harbor to Cohasset Harbor. And because I keep my own Cohasset Harbor, you can't do it, anything more than 1.5 feet. And most of these lobstermen, at least in Duxbury, all the oyster guys have flat bottom boats. And so it's just one thing to also, they might want to think about that. But that's not my question. So if we're talking about applicants, one of the things that I'm concerned about with your location of these new spots is these farmers are even closer to children. And yet there's no requirement in the application that they complete a query form, they have any kind of agreement to a background check. And I will point out, I'm a Scituate Little League baseball coach. I have to complete one. And when I went to my daughter's elementary school to read, I had to complete a query form. So I don't think it's unreasonable with how close these people are going to be to children, and there are a lot of children in that area, to ask that we have some ability to make sure that they're not convicted sex offenders and on some sort of a list. And I know this was brought up like 2 or 3 years ago in either the BOS meeting, and they said that that wasn't required. So I think that this committee has an obligation to protect the kids.
I don't remember that one.
I can show it to you
Okay.
if you like.
Okay, and the answer was it wasn't?
It was not,
Okay.
yes.
We can relook at that. I don't believe any other, because we also, I will say a lot of what we did was based on state requirements and what other towns in the state were doing. And that, I don't remember that in any of the, I know a big thing was the insurance, right? Which was kind of new at the time that we were doing regulations. But I don't recall that being in any of them, but that's something we can talk to DMF about too.
Jamie Davenport, 16 Booth Hill Road, Scituate. You could reach out to Duxbury because they have a robust aquaculture program. And as far as I know, their farms directly abut children's programs like the swimming program.
Yeah.
And number one, I don't think they've ever had any issues. And number two, they would be able to tell you whether their aquaculture permit holders have to take a quarry test.
Yeah.
As an applicant, I have absolutely no problem with taking a quarry.
Or every employee.
Or every employee, yeah.
And it's absolutely, it's not just the farmer, it's everybody who works there, for sure, in my opinion.
Oh, I would like to continue to address the access. I believe my partner and I included mine on our application because one could launch a 10 to 12 foot aluminum skiff with no motor just to go out and check your farm, especially during different times of the year or different times of low tide where people wouldn't be very adversely affected by it. And as to being able to come around from Scituate Harbor, I own an 18-foot Carolina skiff flat bottom boat, and I took it around from Scituate Harbor very successfully, so I wouldn't have a problem.
Susan, on the maps that you have,
Sorry, can you just say your name?
Bill
Thank you,
Graham,
Bill.
Tilden Ave, Scituate. On the maps that you have you done any overlays as to the actual usable area? You've got a large section that is prohibited from planning. You have a section that's conditionally approved. Okay, and then you've got a section that has eelgrass in it, and you have a section with low tide barriers. Can you specify where the actual allowed or anticipated fishing area would be?
That's based on the, are you talking about the, when you say prohibit, are you talking about the line to Strawberry Point, like the line
From
across?
Chase Rock into the beach, into Bassins Beach.
Yeah, it's number 5 Jack Rock to the east of the Cohasset Breakwater.
Yes.
It's
Right.
well beyond Strawberry Point.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it goes all the way down, and it covers White Rock and the whole,
That's a it's a truly approved area.
that's a prohibited area.
It's truly approved.
No, it's,
You wanna look at the map?
the state maps have it right, it's right it out.
Yeah,
Or do you wanna try to pull up the map?
That's all. Because this was discussed a year ago with the.
this was done in, July, I think. This is all prohibited, this is conditional. And before you talked about that this was the only place in Scituate that you could anticipate doing it. This is conditional, the North River and the South River both are conditional.
Not currently.
Yeah.
They know the
They-
suburbs
they
are
are.
closed.
You look at the state regulations.
I would question the state validity of the map as the rivers are currently closed.
It's what they publish on their website.
This state may not be accurate, I'm not challenging you, I'm just telling you it could be
That's the
wrong.
next topic.
But even if this area is conditionally approved, the only thing this prohibits the oyster aquaculturists is to sell into the UE market. Other than that, they can still sell oyster within the 50 states, so.
But it's subject to being closed.
Every portion of the state can be subject to being closed, but
Yes.
currently it's open.
Currently it's open and we're testing with the state.
Has any of the areas been closed this year?
We're at,
Excuse me?
what location?
Well, that area or anywhere along our coast.
No, I think it may have been closer a couple of days during the October storm. That was it.
Here, or he said anywhere on the coast. 'Cause
Well,
didn't we have a
along our
corner
Scituate
boat
coast.
fire for the boat sinking?
That was never closed because the shellfish are still on the boat currently.
Okay.
If they cannot be removed from the vessel being big, then the state would close that area. However, that hasn't happened, and the boat's still sitting there, unfortunately.
The state has a posted notice that it was closed due to storms in January 28th this year. There's no notice that it's been opened. I don't know, do they notify you when that happens?
They're supposed to, yes.
Yeah.
They're supposed to notify selectmen, so.
We can, but thank you, Bill. We can follow up on that, and make sure it's posted on the website, because, we've run into that.
But my real question was, have
Okay.
you developed a map that would tell you where the specific areas that you anticipate going? With the overlay, so the prohibited area and the eelgrass.
We have not done that yet. So with the four corners, that would be the next step. The four corners of
I mean, I think it
Right,
would
that's what
be
we were talking
very,
about last, excuse me, so that's what we were talking about last time, just making it a
Yeah.
highlighted
Yeah.
area, so it's very clear for everybody to see.
because I think it's gonna be a very, very small area that you.
Well, we were just
anticipate.
talking 20 to 30 acres.
No, I think it's probably 4 or 5.
Well, it's almost 2 acres wide.
And you'd have to have a navigational channel through it also.
Right.
So,
Okay. We can, take that action with the state on that map. Yeah.
I could get a smaller screen.
Would you?
Yeah. Okay. We can, look back at the state on that. If it's not posted correctly, this isn't the first time it's happened. We can check.
It's MB10.
MB10. And then that could be, then that is our next step, right, to.
This is the 7/12/2021 map for MB10.
Okay. Alright, we will, Mike, we can,
Yeah, we don't have to.
Yeah.
It's not a showstopper.
no, we can, and we can put that on here as well. Are there any other questions on this topic? Yeah,
Mary Hopkins again. Last meeting, you gave everyone homework to look at the regulations. So I looked at the regulations.
Right.
Did everybody else? I had a question.
yeah.
So,
I did, and I actually thought we would probably need a whole separate meeting.
okay,
But
I'm fine with that. I don't,
based on what the state said with their changing their process.
I can withdraw.
But I would be interested in your questions.
All right, well, I have a few, not too many, like, I didn't want to go overboard. In the regulations, it says shellfish harvesting has to be done by hand and without power unless approved by the constable or the DMF case by case. What does that actually mean?
Do you wanna speak to that, Mike?
Yeah,
Because in Duxbury, they, one of the farms there said they pick by hand a few days a month, but most days they use a dredge that drags behind the boat. So I just wanted to know, how easy is it gonna be to have a case by case where you get machines out there to harvest your oysters?
I'm pretty sure in the regulations, there are no houseboats or things like that can be out there, no floating structures. I don't think dredging was in the regulations, no. I think they plan on throwing them in traps, not dredging.
May I add to this? So I was part of this effort early on. The Duxbury situation is quite different. It's a pure sand bottom. You can run a grader over it and pick up the oysters, and every rock has long since been removed. This area is filled with rocks. You will never be able to do this. So to answer your question, it's never gonna happen.
And we're requiring
Cages, so
Alright,
even
well,
couldn't do it.
See, people have all sorts of answers to my questions, because the next question is, do we allow, or would farmers here even use oyster tumblers?
That's a good question. Jamie uses one.
I use it,
You might.
Jamie.
Offsite though, so.
I use an oyster tumbler, but we use it offsite. It's just much more, aside from there being a noise issue, it's just far easier and more efficient to remove oysters from the farm to an offsite location than tumble them.
So in our regulations, could we say, because then what about, there's a new thing out there called flip farming, where they also use machines to flip, I guess, cages. And so I was wondering if in our regulations, you could say something about noisy mechanized procedures being prohibited. Because this is quite New England, not Jersey.
The example again they're using is an area where there's automation and long strings, and they have boats that flip the cages as they drive forward, and none of these things are gonna happen on this very small.
Floating gear is not, will not be allowed.
So
No, you couldn't do
there's no
floating
floating
gear,
gear.
so but I mean, it's a point to discuss if we want to basically be, right now, it's upon approval, like no one could use it without approval of the constable. Do we want to completely prohibit it? I think that's what you're asking, right?
Well, I think because when we're talking about, just noise.
Yeah.
It's bad enough to have to look at them, but then you have to hear them.
Yeah.
It's quite disingenuous.
I mean, hey, I'm just being honest, I don't think anybody would really want, oyster things in their backyard. And then, one of the
I want to make it. Do you guys? I'm trying to. Why don't we just go on? Okay, so can we,
Another regulation thing, the regulation was about docks and floats.
okay,
And that they're based on there wasn't anything about size or structures, just that they could only be used like for shellfishing. So I was wondering if there are size limits on them. And in one picture I saw of somewhere on the Cape, somebody had a shed on their
yeah, that was prohibited.
Those are all prohibited.
That was actually explicitly prohibited, and we discussed that at night, that it was completely prohibited in our regulations. So there could be no, there was a handful of towns that have it where it's like a shed out there.
Right.
And you actually do the work in the shed, so that is prohibited in our regulations.
Alright, and then the last thing, somebody mentioned following Duxbury, and I think in Duxbury, they talked quite a bit, or they had a specific thing in their regulation about trash and shells and things like that, like not being able to be thrown overboard, and ours was much more vague about trash.
Okay.
And I was just wondering if we could be more specific about that.
That's a great comment. I thought we said,
Which do it to the water or something.
yeah, which isn't specific, but that's a good point. That's something we could be more specific on.
And please also keep in mind that this is a pilot project, so there'll be scrutiny for any licenses that are given.
That was gonna be a question actually I was gonna skip over because I was getting tired of hearing myself talk. But who is doing all the scrutiny? Are we asking our constable, who's also in charge of the harbor and North and South River, to also be scrutinizing Minot? Because that seems like a ginormous area for one person to cover. Because already all the regulations, all the paperwork that are supposed to be filed every year, that's his responsibility as well. So I'm wondering, it's one of those things to talk about scrutiny and all, but sometimes in real life it gets kind of, oh, you didn't turn it in time, well, we'll give you some extra time, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well,
So-
Mike,
so-
why don't you talk about
Yeah, so under the current regulations, the shellfish regulations, police officers can enforce the shellfish regulations. And you also have the Massachusetts Environmental Police around as well, which has state jurisdiction, so it won't be just one person. In the future, if it does kick off as more in the pilot program, you'll probably see more increased role of more shellfish constables, maybe assistant constables, or some cross training with the police officers and the harbor masters.
We've never seen so many environmental police and they really don't have anything to do anymore. There's no other fisheries, so I'm sure we'll be scrutinized.
No, but to follow up on her question, in the pilot program, we expect, whether there's 3 or 6 lots given, or farmers given the permission to try this pilot program for a year, 2 years, whatever we decide. We expect to learn a lot too from the different way, and the farmers will learn from each other. Who's doing it more successfully, who's not being successful, and what their procedures are. These aren't permanent regulations that we're enforcing right now. So in that time period, we will learn. I mean, you're making some really good comments, and maybe some of those will make it to the pilot program regulations. But long term, we expect it to be hopefully good for everybody. And everybody won't be satisfied.
And the applicants will be subject to reapplying, and if they're not good stewards of the area, then they won't be allowed to continue.
Just to follow up on that, what happens when one of those floating docks breaks off and winds up on the beach?
No,
Float.
But I thought you just said the regulations allows for us.
No, it does not.
Not prohibit
She
them.
talked about Duxbury. Ours explicitly
No,
restrict no
I
duck.
didn't see that at all. I thought ours said in fact that it was within the farm's area, so there's no
No
floating docks
floating.
whatsoever.
None, that is true.
Just buoys at the corners of their acreage.
I misread that then.
I misread it too.
Well,
We're doing good.
any other questions?
this is my last one, I promise.
Okay.
It's one of my.
For the record.
It is my last question, because it kind of followed up with, so after a storm, I know in the regulations, it said you have 7 days, if your stuff washes up on somebody's property, you have 7 days to remove it, or it will be removed by the town at a farmer's expense.
Yep.
So let's just say, especially for us on Treasure Island Road, because we are extremely, like we're the first stop for a lot of debris from the ocean. So it winds up on our property, does a farmer just go and get it? Do they have to ask us for permission? And what happens if they hurt themselves while if they were to hurt themselves while they're on our property? Are we responsible for that? Are we liable for that? And that truly is my last question.
Good point.
If you were allowing them on your property, then maybe you would ask them for an affidavit of holding harmless.
Well, one of the negatives to me to having like a large number of farmers is it would be so much easier to me as a property owner if there was 1 or 2 or 3 and you're like, oh, hey, I recognize his boat, Joe Blow, whatever. But when I'm not gonna know anybody and nobody's gonna know me. So when their stuff washes up, like, how am I gonna give anybody permission? They're not gonna call me, they're not gonna know my cell number. And, our property is fairly exposed and, anybody can just walk on there. It's not like, So I just don't, the actual logistics of that, it sounds good, but I'm not sure. We did have a neighbor on, from Glades Road look across and she thought she saw a trash can up that had washed up. And so she walked over and realized it wasn't her trash can, but other than that, you know, I don't know how the actual logistics of that would happen.
We can take that, think about that, Jamie.
Question, did we put, in the rules and regulations, does it state that, aquaculture equipment has to be tagged?
It did.
With identification
Yes,
tag?
it
So the
did.
gear that would be, would be.
It had to have a number.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you found a piece of gear on your property, it's likely that there should be an identification tag on there with a cell phone number. I've lost gear in the past, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I get a phone call. And then I just go and meet whoever it is that, you know, found it.
So that adds responsibility to the homeowner, sensitive to that.
Yes, so 8.1A3 has approved float applicants must obtain an annual mooring permit or renewal for the float location, and you've got to abide by the Scituate rules and regulations on moorings, permits, and mooring wait lists. I believe that requires identification of your gear. From that standpoint, continue to look and see if there's a
So that would be every cage and every buoy, right?
Yeah.
That's what the marshal.
Yeah, the growers will wanna identify their.
They want that.
I mean, if there's a big pile in there, then, so.
Yeah, but you're gonna have your application or your grant number, licensing number.
Well, she makes a good point. If,
Yeah, no.
it shouldn't be her responsibility to go figure out whose stuff is on her property.
Well, we wouldn't, we'd
Yeah.
probably just take it to the wind, so we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna go to that much trouble, sorry, but.
I would, if I had something on my property, with a phone number, I would call the phone.
Oh, how many
I get-
times we would do that though, really?
I know, I'm
After a
serious,
while.
Well, I mean, it
Just like
depends
when
on
a
if it's got
dog
oysters in it, you know.
If there's a dog that came to my property and I called the number on the chat. Dave, did you have a question?
Dave Doffney, 356 Platte Road. If you walked around mine and saw all the lobster balloons hanging on their houses, they save those.
Oh, okay.
And they actually don't have the right to save
There's
those.
no molesting, yeah.
Yeah, that's the owner of, that the property owner of that is the lobsterman, so it depends, I guess, on what side of the fence you're on in this whole discussion, and whether or not a oyster bag would be ornamental or not, whether or not it would keep it. I just thought I'd throw that in.
Good point, Dave.
Traditionally, the homeowners in those areas would hang the buoys or the gear in their front of their house.
So you can get
the fish would come.
Yeah,
They're probably not a cage.
respect.
Good news.
Yeah, good name, just anyway.
The others have it in the back of their house, right? Okay, any other,
What's our next step?
is our next step, it's.
We have to update the regulations for the new applications.
Yeah, we do have to, do you think, we should probably have a separate meeting and advertise that we're looking at regulations.
Do we wanna have an executive session before we
I don't think so. I mean, I can let our attorney know that we're looking at the regulations.
I just wanted to backtrack to a topic we talked about earlier, to Mike, and what Bill was asking about with regards to the conditionally approved and prohibited. If, bodies of water are typically classified as either prohibited or conditionally approved based on water quality, what was the reasoning, I think for everyone, we wanna know, what's the reasoning behind this classification of it being conditionally approved, and that the only way that it affects potential aquaculture would be sales to the EU?
That will be a question I will be emailing Ray Fisher tomorrow morning. And also ask why we're not getting the updates.
And quickly, I looked online at the MIPA regulations, and it says it's free. And it typically takes 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh, interesting.
So I thought that.
If you somebody has to fill the stuff out. And it may not even trigger a MEPA review, but you still have to check that box. But I can tell you another town I'm working for that we pay like $7,500 to put it all together. It's not that simple.
Yeah.
Our next step would be to review the regulations, to refine them, tweak them.
Yep.
With all the input.
And we can advertise, a meeting to go through the regulations, and we can put the regulations up and go.
And also pinpoint the areas that.
Pinpoint the areas, we would lock them up and then discuss and advise, because it would have to get approved by the select board. So, any sort of regulations. Yes,
Susan, question on the Merrill did your overlay on the map? You have some maps that Merrill did?
Merrill did the, survey, and
Survey.
CSCR did the eelgrass overlay.
Is that available?
It's on our website.
Is it available in hard copy printed in?
No, it's not. I don't have a hard copy. I have an electronic copy.
Okay. Another question on that. How much was the process of that map? Who paid for it?
I don't have that information. The town paid for it. I don't have that information.
So who would be the contact? The
I
selectmen?
can ask about that. I would think, Jim Woodrow would know.
Okay,
But,
thank you.
All right, so, for our next meeting, we can do regulations and, work. I think we've also gotta, I've gotta dig into this map to try to do another overlay and try to get spots for Four Corners to figure out how to do
Just
that.
highlighting the
Highlighting the,
non-controversial areas.
yep. Is someone, okay. Someone raised their hand or no, okay. All right, so anything else, is there anything I'm missing?
I had a quick question.
Yeah,
On
Craig,
the map, it doesn't say how
can
deep
you
it
say your
is.
address?
Oh, yeah, Craig Rosenquist, 17 Acorn Street, Scituate. It doesn't say how deep it is at low tide. Do you know how deep that area is at low tide?
That's a great question.
Where about?
Swimming. It's like, it was
Well,
kind of
it's
like
really-
up
it's
there.
really
around me.
maybe open up.
Depends on how tall you are.
I don't know, it's like up
Well,
there.
I don't know, it's, you know, but the cage would be sitting on a, is it only a few inches or is it a few feet?
Ankle to waist deep water.
Ankle to
Yeah.
waist deep if you're,
Low tide.
Jamie's height.
Yeah, low tide.
Chest.
It's over my head.
Some of us were snorkeling, but yeah,
Ankles to waist is a longer than scale.
yeah, it depends how tall you are, but yeah, it's okay. All right, great, next steps, so we'll dig into the map. In our next meeting, we will dig into the regulations. And we will have them, online, similar to this, where we can.
Online before the meeting. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'll have them, they're posted online, I can, they're posted actually on.
But our revisions we'll talk about.
Our revisions we'll talk about, I'm just saying we should have this scenario where we do a hybrid, I could put them up on the screen so that we could walk through them and see. And then work on the map as far as Four Corners and the prohibited area. Which I think, we could just put a line there. I mean, it's a lot of the space we weren't thinking of anyway. Anything else? All right, we're good for the next topic, update on recreational shellfish closure. Mike, you, good to go on that?
So, the last time we talked about the 300-meter grid down to a 10-meter grid, I think we showed some pictures of the gridding. I'm told that it's going well, this should be done by the summer. I've asked a couple of times for 2-week intervals of reports, and I haven't really got that too accurate from the registrations, but I'm told that's going well, and it should be done by the summer. I know they expanded the area to the South River, they expanded it pretty far to the creeks and tributaries, which adds to the more water flow, which is kind of a good thing for us. So they're in the process of, SMS is moving forward with the development of the model. Currently, they are adding tidal forcing to the new high resolution domain, which is a 10 millimeter and more complex. Once completed, they will use load data from the Scituate wastewater treatment plant discharge monitoring reports we've provided, along with using the database of coastal environmental conditions parameters for their first runs. No timeline has been given for when that will occur. Again, we hope and expect to have results this summer based on recent meetings. That was from Jeff Kennedy. I've also emailed our local biologist, Holly Williams, and she reports that it's going well from Dr. Chen from UMass Dartmouth. That's what they've given me. I think we're kind of fortunate that we were picked first, they have all this done, so that it's going. And I believe Cohasset is probably next.
How about Plymouth? Nothing going on in Plymouth?
Plymouth actually is upland, so they were able to work that out, and that's where I think I mentioned, truly approved, the condition approved. Parts of Cohasset and Duxbury are conditionally approved, no different than this, some parts were different, they were moving things around. I'm not gonna speak for Duxbury, Kingston, and Plymouth, because they're kind of the conglomerate with oyster aquaculture around here, but I don't think we should be treated any different, unfortunately, I think we kind of are. But I know they were able to work through their models and areas that were open and looking to be closed, so.
So the state did not close them.
They were, I think some areas got moved outside of that area, so. But I think you look at Duxbury Bay versus the amount of water that comes out of the north and south rivers, I think it's clear greater in the rivers as well, that's just my opinion. Duxbury Bay is not that deep at high tide, and there's parts of the river that are fairly deep and much longer, a lot more water coming out of the rivers, in my opinion. I think last meeting too, I touched on having two biologists on board and kind of, I was there for showing them the investment Big Bang. Made it a point to bring them to the river to show them the outgoing tide of the North River versus the South River. And you could clearly see all the river was running down the North River and no water was running down the South River with the outgoing tide. So while the South River is currently closed, is baffling to me to make it more palatable or more polite, but I think at this point, their South River should at least be open while this model is going on, and that's just my opinion. So I'm sure others would graciously agree with me. Any questions?
Go to the point. Is there any enforcement by the environmental police on the closed flats, or has there been any
They want you to consider that MEPs are around quite a bit, they're around quite a bit, they have authority to enforce that. There are cameras on the rivers as well, so, you know, are we there 24 hours a day? No. So, there hasn't been any evidence of digging out there that I've seen, so.
Yep, Dave Goffney, Flat Road, Scituate. I think as we followed this whole process and as it's gotten kicked down the road for the last 2.5 years, when they speak about a July timeframe with results, is that the complete study? And in the July timeframe, they're going to say this to whomever, this is what we recommend? Or is the gridding portion of the survey that's being done gonna be finished in July, and we're another year out on water quality, on water study, on plant study, on all the other things? So I'm unclear on.
Well, I can just give you, what I get, Dave, I see it as the study being done in July. They've been testing the rivers all along, and they've been very clean. They're mandated to do 5 runs a year on those rivers to keep, because those areas to keep them open. So, it's currently closed, it could make it prohibitive, make it even harder to open in the future, so I think we're doing okay there. But I know government has one speed and it's not fast.
No, I'm just not clear on this process. They've talked about this since November 1st, and so the July that they're offering to the public on this, is that a completed study? Here you go, this is what we have, or we just add another step? That's what I'm unsure about.
I'm hoping, because that'll be 8 months for them to do it, so I'm hoping that's the last, but I will get more clarity for you.
Okay, I'm just,
Yeah.
they say one thing, I've been in it long enough where they say something and they get there, and that's step one. So I'm not sure where their end game is gonna be, but I just like to know.
Dave, I'm not gonna speak for you, but I'm gonna maybe ask it differently, is come July, are they gonna have enough information to make a decision for opening here November 1st? Is that fair? Okay, good way to
Yeah, it's
ask
just,
it.
I can only ask a question. I would hope so. An 8-month study is pretty long.
That's my understanding, so.
I mean, one would hope.
Well,
Hope is
I don't know
diminishing.
how,
Doesn't float.
There's a lot of hope going on.
If someone were to ask me what's my understanding of that, that's my understanding of it. So if they came back and said, oh, no, we gotta look at the grasses, or we gotta look at the, who knows what else. My understanding was that flow model, the modeling, and they are doing that. They recast the whole thing, right? Like they did it this way, and then they're gonna recast it, and they gave us those maps the last time. And that's what they're going with, and that's what's giving them the answers. So I think it's definitely worth asking, because I agree with you. I think that's my understanding if someone asked me.
Yeah, but I will say, one positive thing, I think I mentioned that previous meetings were, they were testing the sewer plant weekly, I think on Mondays. I've asked about that because I wanted the results, and they said they've stopped doing that. And the reason why, because the results were very good. So that's pretty positive. So that's a good step.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, so,
Can you say your name?
oh
You
yeah,
haven't
my name's
talked.
Jeff Gordon, I'm from Norwell, is it still okay?
Oh, no, this is the first time you talked, so I was wondering.
I guess. West Scituate.
South Scituate.
South, we call that South Scituate.
So, well, two things on the, this dilution study. I was on a meeting, the other day, basically the Massachusetts version of this board here. And, they were talking about, having to go beyond the dilution study. And, the way that I understand it was they don't care how good the water is coming out of the treatment plant at all. That is not an issue, which is mind-boggling to me, but that's a separate thing. They want to plan on, their plan is that there's gonna be a release, right? They wanna treat it for untreated sewage. And that's, I really got that impression from the meeting. And then when I asked the question also about, with this dilution study, there's this 1,000 to 1 ratio. There's this 1,000 to 1 ratio thing that's really important in the dilution study. That's why they do it. They want to know that there's 1,000 to 1 dilution. But it begs the question, does the performance of the plant matter? Meaning, if Scituate is releasing, let's say, 10 coliform 100 milligrams, and up in Quincy, let's say, or up somewhere on the Merrimack River, they're doing 50. There's no distinction as far as the effluent that's actually entering the mosquito ditch up here. And so they don't seem to care whatsoever about the performance of the plant, which again is just, it's amazing that they don't care. But now they're saying, according to what you said, Mike, they're gonna look at the load from the plant. And so here's the thing, we're getting, I've been very active in trying to understand this, and we get different answers all the time. So I guess, yeah, if you could get them to commit to something and get it in writing and disseminate it, that would be really good. I sat, when I got involved in this, I was at the meeting at the Scituate Library last June 17th, where Jeff Kennedy's, he was asked, when can you start this dilution study? He said probably July. Last July, they hadn't even funded it. So, they haven't been straight in a lot of this information. So it has to be in, I think we should know if they care about the plant, if they care at all about what the plant's putting out, they should. But we should know if they really care or don't they. That's not been clear. And whether this dilution study is gonna have a delineation point where you can actually go out and do this stuff. They have not been forthcoming whatsoever. We need it in writing. Sorry.
The other thing that, and just, again, me trying to understand, and Jeff, I appreciate all the work that you've been doing on this, and Dave and Mike. The study's going on, we're still gonna need the state to back off and to reverse their decision effectively, which is, federal government says this is what we're going by. Isn't that the big challenge here?
No. Yeah.
Yes and no.
I mean,
The big challenge is we're being lumped into commercial regulations when it's
Right.
recreational shellfish.
Exactly.
That's really the issue.
and that's what
And
they're
Dave can-
flawed by.
It's like book and page number, I'm sure.
But, so that's what they're going by, saying, hey, you fall into this category, even though it's
There's only one
not
model
commercial and not, not distributed interstate and all that stuff. And so all these studies have been funded, and if it shows up, it's one per million versus one per 10,000 or whatever they're looking for, one part per thousand, it could be completely clean water. We still need them to say, okay, we're going to go back on our original decision, which was you have to fall under the federal guidelines and allow these beds to be open. Is that the process? Once they get these studies back, then we're waiting for them to come back and say, yeah, you can open them again.
Ultimately, it's gonna be the marine fisheries decision.
Right, to go back on their
It's
original.
not a federal, it's not a federal mandate, and they don't have, the federal government can really care less what happens in recreational shellfishing bed areas.
And you confirm that,
So it's a lot of people who don't confirm that.
I have some insight on that. I know a little beyond this. So I know that Samantha Woods from the North and South Rivers Watershed Association recently sent a lengthy legal rebuttal to Commissioner Amadon's letter. Commissioner Amadon is Fish and Wildlife, to whom DMF reports, and so we had gone to Commissioner Amadon to try to see if he could provide some perhaps a legal avenue to get past these regulations, that the whole idea of using the National Shellfish Sanitation Program brings. And 2 days after the shellfish demonstration down at Ridgeway, he actually did give us a response. And the response was, hey, the regs say that we get to regulate this, and so it's on us to enforce the NSSP guidelines. In as many words, it's much more detailed than that. And I can get a copy to anyone who would like to see that above. But just last week, Samantha Woods and Watershed Association letterhead had rebutted Commissioner Amadon's legal arguments through Watershed's general counsel. And so there's a legal rebuttal basically saying that you should be able to allow this without taking heat from the feds, which is what predicated this whole thing in the first place. So that is in play, where they're trying to find an actual legal route to open these shellfish beds to give DMF cover, because they're afraid of somebody getting sick, and then, that's not gonna put out.
Okay, we have somebody on the Zoom, and Chris, I just asked you to unmute, so you should be able to unmute.
Yes, thank you. My name is Chris Newhall. I'm a Scituate resident, 7th Strawberry Lane. I think maybe one of my kind of questions and concerns was maybe just answered there, but I guess I'd like to, ask Mike when he speaks with DMF if he could get a written, I guess, like listing of steps that are going to happen once this study is completed, so that, again, as previously mentioned, it's been very vague about what needs to happen and then what the next step in the process is and how long it's all going to take. And, again, it's been 2.5 years. The flats in the North River are some of the best places to dig around. We've been digging clams out of there for years without getting sick or having any issues like that. There's procedures in place to close the beds down when, there is some type of a storm that's causing an overflow issue at the plant, or a malfunction at the plant, or even just, general runoff conditions. So it seems like a fairly well-established and safe process, but, a path from DMF on how what steps we need to take to get resolution to this, because if we didn't push it, honestly, it would languish and it would go nowhere. And that's my opinion. It seems like that was sort of their position initially before even getting the study, grant money for the study to be done. So, it's an important thing. And if we're looking at, opening up Bassins Beach to leases and things like that, I mean, if North and South Rivers are closed down, then Bassins Beach is the only place that any recreational shellfishing will be able to occur. And, if those are occupied by leases, and I'm not going to sit here and say it's the best shellfishing around anyways, but that's the only location that we would have left. And then if we're implementing aquaculture that precludes any type of recreational fishing, and then the North and South River flats are closed, basically everybody else is just left hung out to dry. That's all I've got to say.
Good question, and I think you've written that down as something to ask, right? A list of steps.
Dave Doffany, Black Road. I would like to add to the record that I did receive, after multiple attempts from Elizabeth Woman at Winter Park, Florida's shellfish sanitation specialist supervisor, that the FDA, this is on February 2nd to me, the FDA has no concerns regarding Massachusetts implementation of recreational harvest. Period. So this back and forth has been frustrating for me and others over the last number of years. We've gone through as much as we can on our end of it, and to be quite honest, at this level, everybody's fighting the right fight, and when you get to DMF, it dies. There's zero concern whatsoever on what anybody else brings to the table to diffuse their approach to it. So I just wanted the record to reflect that that's the shellfish sanitation program's take and position on recreational shellfishing, that they have no concerns.
National.
Right.
I just add just one piece of color from Jeff Gordon, South Situate. These NSSP guidelines, the federal guidelines on shellfishing, is 506 pages long. There are 2 times the word recreational appears. One is on page 260, and it is simply a reference for classification. And the second is in the very, very end of the document. It's like page 502 is the second use of the word recreational. It is just used for a historical perspective. So it is clear from if you read the regulations, and it's 506 pages, 10-point font, not a lot of pictures. There's a lot of regs in there, but they don't talk about commercial regs, which is why Bess Warman, who is basically the national East Shore Shellfish Warden, says we don't care about recreational. But again, the DMF is using this as their shield, and so anyway, getting some specificity out of them, would be really good, because they don't want to move.
I think, Jeff, you've been on many emails I've been on. I will gladly share my Scituate emails, my Marshall emails with you. Equally as frustrated as a lot of you guys are. I do copy our constituents, Senator O'Connor, Steve Redpack here, they've been on it. Both boards of selectmen are copied in all my emails I send back and forth to the state. So they're all in the same loop. So it's not just me fighting this fight, it's everybody in the room too. I mean, I'm only one person, but I have a vested interest in this too. I mean, I'm a prized recreational digger myself, not as good as Dave, but I do pretty good. And we've done a lot in the rivers, and Dave has too. Dave's a good steward of rivers, and a lot of people got the South River open years ago when it was closed for 20 years. So I'm with you. I'm equally as frustrated as well. It's a little hard for me being a town employee, and the person that tries to get all the answers. But it is strength in numbers, and patience does help. You do get more honey than you do vinegar sometimes, but I have to be a little more judicious about it, so. The history of me calling and emailing people, I'm pretty tenacious, I can tell you that. So I don't let things slide very easily. The history is there.
Any other questions, either on Zoom or in the room? We're good with next steps on DMF too. Okay. As far as next meeting, can we do in 2 weeks, or do you wanna kick to a 2-week cadence to?
I'll get a quick overview from Marine Fisheries on where we're at being 2 weeks,
Yep.
and then I think we delve into the regulations.
Delve into the regulations, okay. And I will look for same place, same time, 2 weeks, puts us the 23rd, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I will look for same place, same time, cause I think there's only 3 of these that you can do hybrid in the town so far. Okay. Are there
Thank you all
any?
the shellfishing and responding.
Yeah,
You
thank
know,
you.
if you folks in the room, I have my town email is mdemayo@situatema.gov. If you have suggestions, questions you want specifically answered, I will let it cut and paste it and form off this date. I have no problem with that. So,
Or suggestions for the revisions of the.
Yeah,
Serious, those are good points.
the regulations.
I'm sure you guys wrote them all down, right?
No, I did. I wrote every single one. I wrote all of them down right here.
If you guys see the notes that this secretary has, she's like.
Our secretary's awesome. We have a new secretary. Yeah. Thank God, they're all about to plan to be secretary. And the Shellfish has an email as well, shellfish at situatema.gov, and please send your questions ahead of time if you have them on the regulations, and we will walk through the regulations and discuss things that we need to change. Track change discussion, so we can do it as we go. Anything else, walk on? No? All right, we're done then at 8. Motion to adjourn at 8:37 before the doors lock at the town hall, because that happens at 9 o'clock.
Motion's been made and seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank
Done, thank you.